Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Start to a new week here. So today we're going to be jumping back into the Warhammer 40K universe. This has been a requested video for me to take a look at. The second founding and every Space Marine chapter is created by Arbitor Ian, Warhammer 40K lore. So we're going to jump in and check this out today. So as always, links down below in the description to the original channel and video here. So you do me a favor, click those links. If you enjoyed this video by Arbitor Ian, give it a like. If you like his content, do give him a sub. Makes a lot of great content for the Warhammer 40K universe. Man definitely deserves some love. Doing this reaction live for the YouTube members. If you want to come join us, we'd love to have you in here and hear your opinions on various things that we discuss. And yeah, check that out. See if any of the YouTube membership benefit tiers have any interest to you. If you want to take your sport to the next level. Regardless, I just appreciate you guys watching the videos, taking the time out of your busy day to do so. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So, with all the shameless stuff said, let's get into the video here. We're just gonna jump right on into it. Get the volume up there. Boom.
Hi gang, most fans of Warhammer 40K are familiar with the concept of the Space Marine chapter.
Yep.
The Space Marines of the 41st millennium are broken down into innumerable separate chapters, spread across the galaxy, each a whole...
Pause. Thank you. Sometimes, I don't know what it is. Sometimes I hit the space bar and the YouTube video refuses to pause. Sometimes I hit, the buttons to rewind and fast forward and it just doesn't do it. Anyway, what I was gonna say is, like, most of my knowledge, honestly, is still kind of from, I guess I still have a fair good amount of knowledge of the actual 40K timeline. Most of the stuff that I'm familiar with is stuff from the 30K era with the Primarchs and their, legions. So, and it's pretty crazy, honestly, how many chapters there are of Space Marines. And after the Heresy, with all them getting split up, it's hard to keep track of them all and memorize them, honestly. So I'm interested to hear the different variations of them, and I guess some more lore, where they came from, origins, etc. I doubt he's gonna have time to get into all of them, maybe, but I guess we'll find out.
Wholly independent separate chapters spread across the galaxy, each a wholly independent organization with its own heraldry and traditions, its own homeworld or domain to protect, and looking to its own recruitment and maintenance. But that wasn't how the Space Marines were originally organized. So how did it come about? In this video, we're going to take a look at the second founding, the great reorganization of the Adeptus Astartes, and all the different chapters that were created from it. In Warhammer 40K, Space Marines are everywhere, and I don't just mean filling out the shelves of your local hobby shop. The various chapters of Space Marines are stationed on homeworlds, orbital fortress monasteries, or in crusade fleets that are spread across the Imperium, organized according to an ancient text known as the Codex Astartes that specifies their numbers, about 1,000 Marines per chapter, their organization into various companies and squads. Which I know some of them don't necessarily follow a lot of that, like the Black Templars, for example. They kind of still go by the old Great Crusade rules. They don't really keep their numbers to 1,000 or under, kind of a situation. So not everyone really necessarily follows these rules. Their tactics, their support staff, and the ancient rights each chapter master has to rule over their homeworld, demand tithes of men and material, and to commit their forces to the defense of the Imperium as they see fit, with no other branch of the Imperium able to claim authority over them. But that wasn't always the case. Once, Space Marines marched to war in great legions, rank upon rank of soldiers who were very much the focus and center of the Imperium's war machine. Which I think that's what I really like about the 30K timeline era, the Horus Heresy era, is just the feeling of mythology. These, demigod beings, Primarchs that are larger than life, that are doing all these heroic feats and all these great battles, and it really kind of being a mythology. And I like that they're starting to seemingly be adding more Primarchs back. They're starting to bring the Primarchs back, and they're ramping things up in the timeline and starting to actually progress things in the present 40K timeline with Gilliman and the Lion returning,
And I would assume they plan on bringing more of them back. How, you know, exactly many Primarchs are going to bring back, and who, I guess, is, you know, left up to debate on whether or not. I mean, Pilvis Corax is still out there somewhere. I could see him coming back in some form or another. I could see Jagatai coming back. I could see Dorn coming back. You know, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Commanding fleets and armies on expeditions of conquest, the shift that broke down the great legions of old and created the chapters we know was instituted in the early 32nd millennium by Rabute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, in an event known as the Second Founding. And it was part of a series of reforms across all the armed forces of the Imperium, designed to better protect it in the years to come. But this reorganization wasn't implemented to better protect the Imperium from the forces of alien empires,
right,
Xenos incursions, or demonic invasion.
To make sure another heresy event wouldn't happen.
From itself. The Second Founding, the creation of the Space Marine chapters as we know it, was very much a reaction to the events of the Horus Heresy. 200 years before, the Emperor had set out on his great crusade from Terra, accompanied by the Astartes of what retroactively became known as the First Founding. 20 legions of Space Marines, each led by their Primarch, each with their own way of doing war, and each many thousands strong. These legions led expeditionary fleets across the galaxy, forcing compliance on all the old human civilizations they encountered, and killing Xenos wherever they could. The expeditionary fleets were massive, self-sufficient combined arms formations.
It is also interesting seeing how alliances are starting to kind of form between Guilliman and the Eldar and things like that. There's a lot more cooperation going on between the Imperium and, you know, some alien races here to, I guess, achieve mutual goals. Because honestly, in the 40K, like, present time, like, things are pretty fucked up. You know, the galaxy's been split in half from the giant Chaos Rift, and Chaos incursions are becoming more frequent. The Tyranids are ramping up. I think the Orcs are ramping up. So, like, everything's starting to go crazy. So I think that's honestly why we're all, again, starting to see more Primarchs show up, because they're trying to ramp things up to bring them back. And I also still think it's also going to lead to something with the Emperor coming back in some form. But I guess we'll see.
Often a corps of Astartes in command, sometimes even a Primarch, accompanied by fleets of warships, troop transports, mobile forges and escorts, millions of regular human auxilia and militia forces, infantry, armoured companies, artillery batteries and air support, and more specialist attachments, like Mechanicum Tagmata, allied night houses or Titan legions. And in the context of the Great Crusade, this made sense. The galaxy was vast and needed to be conquered quickly for the Emperor's plans to take effect, so expeditionary fleets carried with them everything they needed to do that. They had diplomats and iterators to treat with newly found strands of humanity, remembrancers to record their actions, and colossal armies to subdue anyone who resisted, and to provide the garrison forces that would be left in their wake to ensure compliance held. These thousands of fleets were scattered far and wide and often self-sufficient. They developed their own idiosyncratic cultures and practices, often different from the core of the Imperium. And their loyalties were often towards their commanders first, the people who paid them in glory and honour and more practical things like settlement rights of newly discovered planets. And when the Horus Heresy broke out, this proved to be a liability. During the course of the Crusade, 2 of the original 20 legions of the First Founding were lost, leaving 18, by this point, massive legions.
And I still wonder if they're ever going to, like, reveal what really happened to those legions. I know the story is they kind of made that an open thing so that people could homebrew their own legions to fight in tabletop, you know, using those 20 spots or those 2 spots. But I wonder if they're ever going to, like, lore-wise reveal what really happened to those 2 legions. You know, was it a breakdown of their gene seeds? Were they wiped out by a Xenos race? You know, did they turn to chaos early and they covered it up, kind of a situation, you know? Some things never change, yeah.
some hundreds of thousands of legionnaires strong. Half of the Primarchs and their legions, 9, sided with Horus and turned against the Imperium. And I have a video on what they're all up to right now, just here. But because of the expeditionary system,
there's nothing there, he lied.
It wasn't just the legions who turned, it was their entire fleets. When a Primarch turned to Horus, the vast majority of his legion tended to side with him, and that meant the expeditionary fleets those Astartes commanded turned too. The Imperium faced 9 legions of traitor Astartes.
And he was also smart by sending certain legions off, you know, before revealing as a full traitor, he sent certain legions off to do certain things. So they were kind of out of the picture as well while he was, you know, making his way back to Terra to assault Terra. So he was pretty smart in a lot of the actions that he did.
But also traitor militia and auxilia, traitor mechanicum and titans, and fleets of traitor warships. There were instances of rebellion, isolated commanders who stayed loyal and fought against the rest of their fleet or legion, but in most cases, these were swiftly put down. The vast majority of the armies of the traitors simply followed their Primarchs into the service of chaos. Of course, the heresy failed. Horus's initial...
Well, and I kind of feel like that's part of what the heresy is kind of an analogous to, is a lot of things in history like that, like Rome and a lot of the leadership of Rome being betrayed and having, you know, uprisings and rebellions and things like that happen. You know, I think that's part of what this is analogous to. It's just doing it in a sci-fi setting with, you know, demigod beings of great power and on a scale much larger than what we, you know, think of.
Plan had been to establish a power base in the galactic north, isolating many of the larger loyalist legions behind great warp storms in the far galactic east, and then to swiftly move on a direct route to Terra to kill the Emperor and assume command. And
you know, it's also like interesting too, because like when you think about space battles, we still think about them happening kind of on a 2D plane. You know, he's talking about, you know, the north and east and whatnot, but it's like there's also vast distances of space under and above what you would think of as under and above. So it's like, how really are you gonna like create ways to block them off unless like the warp storms are also underneath and above? You know what I'm saying? Like instead of just going straight, you could maybe go underneath and through them, or go over and through them. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It would be, yeah, I don't know. That's just some of the things that I think about when I hear stuff like this. Is like, I wonder, like, not just like surface between like this point to this point, these are covered, but also like up and down in a 3D space. Like, how big were these warp storms?
Also, I've got a video of exactly how that played out there too. But suffice to say, it didn't quite work like that. The traitors scored early victories, knocking some legions out of the war at Prospero and Istvan, but they were harried throughout their journey and forced to fight a brutal, protracted siege of the Imperial Palace that ground down both sides. By the end of the heresy, when the Emperor killed Horus, being mortally wounded himself and installed on the Golden Throne, both the Loyalist and traitor forces were in tatters, reduced to mere thousands of Astartes, and those isolated Loyalist legions, particularly the Ultramarines, always the largest legion, had broken through the warp storms and swept away any shreds of traitor resistance, with hundreds of thousands of relatively fresh and well-supplied Astartes. The immediate years following the Horus Heresy were known as the Scouring. The surviving traitors were hounded back into the Eye of Terror by the avenging Loyalist legions. Planets were recaptured and rebels punished, but while all 9 Loyalist legions took part in this, some were in sorry states. The legions that had been dealt the greatest blows at the start of the war,
Raven Guard,
the
were like
Raven Guard,
decimated.
Salamanders, and Iron Hands, along with the Space Wolves, had numbers in the low thousands. They'd never really had time to rebuild. The 3 that defended Terra, the Imperial Fists, the White Scars, and the Blood Angels, had fared little better, though the Blood Angels, as the first of the isolated legions to arrive, had larger numbers. So the bulk of the scouring was enacted by the Dark Angels, who would quickly have their own problems to deal with, and, of course, by the Ultramarines. Robute Guilliman, the event...
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about just thinking about the event, you know, the various legions pouring down on the Terra, you know, demon incursions happening, and all the loyalist legions and the custodes, and just the immense battles, and the fact that you're also talking about, you know, fighters that are capable of fighting continuously for days or even weeks on end with really not needing a break, not needing to sleep, not needing to eat, not needing to drink. They're literally just made to fight. So it's like also the most intense combat you can think of. So yeah, I'm sure it would be a wild scene to watch, you know? Right, exactly. And then, I mean, like, you know, just thinking of Sanguinius and the fact that he fought, like, what, 2 greater demons and Angron before he fought Horus. You know what I mean? So it's like, if Sanguinius was, you know, at his peak when he fought Horus, what would the outcome have been? Because he literally fought off Angron, a demon Primarch, and 2 greater demons, won those victories, and then fought Horus. You know what I mean? So it would be interesting. It's I think Sanguinius probably would have been at least held him to a stalemate, if not beat Horus. You know, but who knows?
Avenging Sun swept his forces across the galaxy. He was a peerless organizer and statesman. His eastern realm of Ultramar composed of 500 worlds, and so, despite their initial losses in the war, the Ultramarines have rebuilt back to full strength pretty quickly. In the time of the scouring, the Ultramarines were everywhere, shoring up the defences of the Imperium, and Guilliman took over its administration, becoming Lord Commander of all of its military forces, as well as the Imperial Regent in lieu of the Emperor. And in this position, he enacted sweeping reforms to make sure another heresy could never happen. Never again would one person, even a prime...
Yeah, Greater Demon, Angron, 2 Titans, yeah, exactly. Not to mention, yeah, exactly, the other traitor legions, you know, basic infantry, you know, Chaos Space Marines, etc., other regular demons, and then fought off Horus. You know, it's like, again, you know, you got to give credit to Horus, because, like, Horus is smart. Like, he sent all that stuff in with purpose. They're, you know, he made sure that he knew he was going to have to confront Sanguinius and some of the other Primarchs. He made sure the other Primarchs, like Jagatai, was going to be busy with Mortarion, etc. He made sure that they were either going to be busy or they were going to be worn down or defeated by the point, so that Horus could focus on the Emperor and be at peak when he fought the Emperor. You know?
Primarch command as much power as the expeditionary fleets or legions of old. The organizational systems that run the Astra Militarum were instigated, wherein...
I still want to learn more about him, but from what I've looked around, there hasn't been a whole lot of videos done by people on Sanguinius himself yet. So I'm also kind of waiting on something like that to come out, whether, you know, Amber King or Voldemort or whoever does, you know, a good video on him. And I kind of want to leave Sanguinius and Horus for the last Primarchs to go over. Like, I think I'll do Sanguinius and then Horus for the last 2 Primarchs in that order as well.
Each regiment raised would be focused around a different discipline with no combined arms ability. This new Imperial Guard was separated from the Imperial Navy with a different command structure, each of which limited the ability of rebellious generals or marshals to move against the Imperium. A rebellious infantry officer would lack artillery support. A rebellious naval admiral would lack ground troops.
Right. And that was, I think, one of the biggest problems that Horus faced, is that, like, he had to really rush his attack and not have as much time planning, because he didn't have the resources that the Imperium had, right? Like, he had basically what he had, and when he turned traitor and everyone found out about it, those resources were he'd either already taken them and what he had is what he had, or, you know, that was it. So he had to kind of like really press his attack because he wasn't going to get any more Marines. He wasn't going to get any more, you know, resupplies, reinforcements, etc. So he had to really quickly try to take the Imperium for himself in order to reestablish everything.
But the biggest of these reforms was the proposed breakdown of the remaining loyalist legions. Guilliman suggested that the legions be broken down into their individual chapters. Chapter was already a division used by various legions, officially denoting a formation of...
That's the thing that kind of confused me too, because I had heard them talking about chapters before, already, while they were also still talking about legions. So that was what was confusing me at one point. And I was like, what are they talking about with chapters and legions here? And at the end, the trainers primaries kept messing and playing. Yeah, exactly. A lot of them kept getting baited in things. Mortarion, I think, got baited by Jagatai in the end. And yeah, they messed up his plans for sure. And it came down to him trying to bait the Emperor into single combat, which obviously we know how that turned out. I don't know. I still wonder if it's not. I still wonder if it's all just not part of some kind of plan the Emperor had. You know what I mean? Like you have to question that, because it's like, if the Emperor is capable of psychically being able to, I guess the theory is that the Primarchs are also like greater demons that he was able to defeat, I guess, and take their essence and put them into bodies, you know? So if he's able to single-handedly, seemingly effortlessly, take on greater demons, capture their essence, and put it in bodies, and if he is at a point where even he's able to hold off the influence of the Chaos Gods themselves on him, you just gotta wonder, like, how did he lose if he didn't want to? You know what I mean? Like, with everything that's gone on, you know, you see that, and I think it's true that the Emperor both saw the Primarchs as his sons, but also tools. I think he had conflicted issues with that. You know, I think he did have genuine love for them at times, and saw them as his sons and his creations, and you know, but he also still, there was a part of him that like kept emotion away from that and saw them as tools, and they were tools to be used. And so again, like, I feel like in the position, when you think about the position the Emperor is in, like, if you die, the Imperium pretty much dies with you. So I don't feel like he would hold back purposefully. I think he would go full force from the beginning. So if he's holding back, it seems like there would need to be more to it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Again, that could just be, you know, me projecting my own thought process onto the situation and wanting something more to be out of that. And maybe it really was just the Emperor wasn't as powerful or as great a warrior as we thought. But I mean, if that's the case, then, you know, he psychically was able to rip Horus's soul apart and destroy it into nothingness, so his soul could never be used again. So it's like, he could have done that from the beginning. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, maybe it was just like people have said, it could just be the fact that, you know, Horus was so juiced up on power from the Chaos Gods, all of the Chaos Gods, that he was still just too much for the Emperor to handle. And that one moment of weakness where Horus realized what was happening, the Emperor was able to take advantage and turn the tide. And I don't know. Chapters in 30K are more like sections of companies of Legion, about the size of 40K chapters, but still part of the Legion authority. Yeah, that's kind of what I had figured out as well. Like, there was the overall Legion, and then those legions were just broken down into like chapters with their own leaders. You know, the Primarch would be at the head, and then the Primarch would have his generals, and those generals would be in charge of the overall chapters, and then those chapters would have, you know, commanders, sergeants, or whatever that were in charge of smaller squads that would go out and do smaller things, etc., etc. It kept, you know, going down. But anyway, let's continue with the video.
10 companies, nominally numbering 1,000 Marines. though some legions either didn't use it or used the term for much larger formations. Each of these chapters would be organized according to the principles laid out in Guilliman's Codex Astartes, a tome that was not only a treatise on the methods of war to be used by the Space Marines, but also specified the number of companies, ranks, and support staff in a chapter, and the markings required. The methods in the Codex have been tried and tested through the Heresy and the scouring by the Ultramarines. Guilliman's inductee units, squads raised quickly mid-war to fight in the Heresy, had already been organised along lines that would be familiar to anyone reading the Codex. As the Imperium shifted under Guilliman from an empire of constant expansion to one of defence and consolidation, these new chapters will be posted throughout the galaxy, either to specific worlds or regions of space, or as fleet-based crusading chapters free to intervene wherever they wished. The chapters would also be independent of the rest of the Imperium, each an isolated and self-sufficient force. The chapter masters would be the planetary governors of their own homeworlds, which were sacrosanct from interference by the rest of the Imperium, and would look to their own recruitment and training, bound by ancient oath and intervening wherever they saw fit, but no longer in overall command of the Imperium's armies or its government. There was resistance to this. While some Primarchs agreed with the plans, some were extremely reticent. Liman Russ of the Space Wolves and Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists initially flat out refused to break up their legions. Speaking much later, Nasir Amit of the Flesh Tearers all but thought of Guilliman as a traitor for what he'd done. Guilliman the Butcher. With law and edict, Guilliman ripped the heart from the legions. Even his own sons were not spared his treachery. Where Horus had sought to use a hammer blow, Guilliman used a duelist's blade. In the end, the result was the same. Brother became cousin, cousin became exile. But over time, and with the prospect of the debate potentially dissolving into another civil war, one the Imperium could not really afford, both of those Primarchs relented, and 7 years after the end of the Horus Heresy, in 021 M31, the second founding was officially written into Imperial law, and the legions ceased to exist. In each case, one of the new chapters formed retained the heraldry, homeworld, and symbols of the original legion. So 1,000 of the old Ultramarines legion stayed on as the Ultramarines chapter, these chapters becoming known as the Progenitor chapters. The rest took on new names, symbols, and heraldry, becoming known as the Successor chapters.
Gotcha.
Actually, Successor chapters.
So that's what the Successor chapters kind of mean. I got that. That was always something that kind of confused me a little bit too. I figured as much it was something along those lines. It was like, okay, these are the guys that have come after the Horus Heresy events, and these are the chapters that have spawned off of the initial legions. You know, I kind of gathered that's pretty much what it was, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Chapters is one of those terms that's used a few different ways in 40k. Sometimes it only refers to the chapters created in this second founding, and then sometimes it refers to any chapter who isn't one of the 9 progenitors. How the legions were broken down varied. In some cases, the new successor chapters were simply existing divisions of the old legion, such as when the Ultramarines 22nd chapter became the Nemesis chapter. In some cases, they were founded in honor of a legion hero, given command of the new force because of particular actions during the heresy. And in some, they were formed from legionnaires who thought alike, such as with the Fists Exemplar, formed from those Imperial Fists who most supported the split. Chapters might even have been founded as a way of redesignating rogue Astartes elements, the Black Shield formations active during the Heresy War. Many of these new chapters would be Codex compliant, following the organizational doctrines laid out in this new Codex Astartes.
I still feel like there's like, it's got to be so much to keep track of all these various chapters and what they do and their style of fighting, their tactics they prefer to use, etc., etc. Like, it's got to be hard to like really keep track of it, and in situations where they need to be deployed wherever, like, it's got to still be hard to, like, you know, pick a specific chapter out of all of these chapters to go deal with something because that's what they specialize in. You know what I mean?
In some cases as if it was a holy document, and some were less so, either following the idiosyncratic organization of their original legion or just disregarding the Codex altogether. Some controls were placed on these new chapters. Each was required to regularly submit a tithe of their gene seed to the Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars so that it could be tested for purity and any defects could be monitored.
Makes sense.
And also to maintain a reserve in case a chapter needed to be rebuilt after taking heavy losses, or to form the basis for further foundings. Many new chapters...
Because I'm sure there were a ton of gene seeds that were lost in the assault on Terra and are potentially corrupted by chaos. So
chapters came into existence with this in the early years of M31, but unfortunately we don't exactly know how many. In the 10,000 years since the second founding, full records, if they ever even existed, have been lost. The Apocrypha of Scaros is the oldest known example of the Codex Astartes, and that lists various chapters created during the second founding, including saying that 23 were created from the former Ultramarines Legion, though it doesn't actually list them all, and in the current year only about 18 can be traced back to then. The Apocrypha of Davio was a 33rd millennium attempt to recreate that original list, but it was never completed, and as such there's no official record in the Imperium of exactly which ones were created then. Over the intervening 10 millennia, many chapters have lost their official records in invasions and attacks, or have fallen out with their forebears and forsworn any connection to them, or have even created for themselves noble heritages that may not actually be true. So while I'm now going to go through each legion, the known chapters they created, and what those chapters became known for, bear in mind that since no record is ever complete, there might be more ones out there, either still active or long since destroyed, that were founded at the same time. As I said, the vast majority of chapters created were from the Ultramarines Legion, so let's leave them till last. At the time of the second founding, the Dark Angels Legion had had an eventful few years.
My boys.
In the immediate
I like the Dark Angels. They're one of my favorite legions that I guess now turned into chapters. I really like their lore, and I like Lionel Johnson. I think Lionel Johnson's probably one of my favorite Primarchs. I feel like if I were a Primarch, he would probably be the closest one I would be, you know, as far as his attitude and how he does things, etc. I would probably, I would like to think anyway that I'd be pretty similar to Lionel Johnson.
Aftermath of the heresy, the Dark Angels have returned to their homeworld, Caliban, to find that its defenders, under Luther, had declared themselves independent from the Imperium, tainted by the mysterious thing at the heart of the planet. Their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, had responded by destroying the planet and descending to its remains to fight Luther, and all this had resulted in the traitors, known as the Fallen, being scattered through the warp, and the Primarch disappearing, rumoured to be slumbering in the depths of the Rock, the old Legion fortress and the only surviving fragment of the planet. The remaining leaders of the Dark Angels were terrified of this secret getting out, and the Legion being declared traitors as a whole, so they implemented reforms to their Legion, the cementing of the position of the inner circle as the top level of Legion command, the only Astartes allowed to know the truth, the dedication of the Dark Angels to the hunt, searching for the Fallen wherever they might appear as a matter of utmost priority, and the positioning of the Raven Wing as their main tool of the hunt. When the decree came for the breaking down of the legions into chapters, the Dark Angels acquiesced, unwilling to raise the suspicions of the Imperium. The successor chapters of the Dark Angels, known amongst themselves as the Unforgiven, all inherited these.
Let's see, Reclusium, is that what it's pronounced? Yeah, Reclusium, Grandmaster of Chaplains, very good at Chaplains. First Company, the Deathwing Grandmaster, undisclosed number of Deathwing Terminator and Deathwing Knight squads. Chapter Command, Supreme Grandmaster, heads a council drawn from the most senior members of the Inner Circle. Second Company is the Raven Ring Grandmaster, undisclosed number of bikes and lane speeders and atmospheric fighters. Librarians, Grandmaster Librarians. Gotcha, yeah.
Oaths and practices, and together these Unforgiven chapters often act more like the Legion of old, generally responding favourably to requests from the Grand Master of the Dark Angels chapter and coordinating their hunt for the Fallen. There are 3 officially recorded Dark Angel successors in the Apocrypha of Davio: the Angels of Vengeance, the Angels of Absolution, and the Angels of Redemption, but there are a number of others mentioned that might well be lost second founding successors for various reasons. The Angels of Redemption were a variant of the Dark Angels standard scheme, halved in dark green and bone with a winged skull as their symbol. They're noted as being particularly zealous in their dedication to the hunt. They're famed across the galaxy as defenders of the Imperium, almost as much as their progenitors, but they're also quick to quit a war zone if a hint of the fallen emerges, which has raised inquisitorial suspicion in the past. Instead of maintaining a Deathwing and a Ravenwing company, their first two companies are both arranged as Ravenwing. The Angels of Vengeance adopted the older Dark Angel scheme of black and red. Their symbol
I like that.
Hooded
I like the black and red
skull.
scheme.
Much like the original First Legion before the discovery of Lionel Johnson, they're noted as being dedicated to the destruction of the Imperium's enemies to the point of obsession, accepting high casualties rather than retreating, committing themselves to suicidal attacks. The Angels of Vengeance are so single-minded they've almost been wiped out on multiple occasions. They conform to the standard Dark Angels company structure, though their first and second companies are known as the Dreadwing and Raptorwing respectively.
How can you remove the enemies of the Emperor and the Imperium if you're dead? You know what I mean?
The Angels of Absolution wear completely bone armor, their symbol a single wing and skull, and stand out as the only Unforgiven chapter who refuse to use that term. Though they participate in the hunt for the fallen, they don't see it as an act of redemption. They believe that they're already redeemed by their actions and any shame has been wiped away, which produces some tension when acting in concert with other Unforgiven chapters. They're one of the few non-fleet based chapters in the Unforgiven, operating from the world of All Hallow. So those are the official three, but then we have muddled records about a few more. The Lion's Sable are listed in some records as being a Dark Angel successor, but no images of their colour scheme or armour remain. It's only noted that they were destroyed while on the hunt for the fallen Angel's cipher, and their recruiting world of Nachtwald passed to the Angels of Vengeance. The Angels of Vigilance are a Space Marine chapter of officially unknown lineage, their armour bright yellow and their symbol a winged crucible and flame, with mixed records indicating that they were formed either in the 25th founding or during the second founding. However, their chapter organization is extremely similar.
25th founding? Like, how many foundings are there, brother? Like, good lord.
Similar to those of the Unforgiven chapters, and their fortress monastery is an orbital dock stationed around the world of Periviglium, a planet that was subjugated by the Dark Angels Legion shortly after the Heresy, who decreed that a contingent of that legion should remain on the planet forever to ensure they never strayed again from the rule of the Imperium. So it seems likely that they're a Dark Angels successor, even if they don't know it anymore. The Consecrators are known as a Dark Angels successor, one of the Unforgiven, but they're from an unknown founding. They wear the original scheme of the First Legion, black and red, but otherwise little's known about them. They have no Imperial records before the start of the 40th millennium. They appear without warning, and they give away very little of their organization. However, their chapter symbol is the flame in a crucible, almost identical to the old Legion formation of the Firewing, the First Legion's mysterious covert ops specialists. And their armory does seem to include a huge number of sacred relics, ancient marks of power armor,
that could be another division
of
their
rare
covert
patterns,
ops.
almost as if they inherited all the oldest and most revered arms of the original Legion.
The elite, they're like the Delta Force of the covert ops. They're like the elite of the elite covert ops, I guess you could say. That's what I would think anyway. A lot, yeah. There seems like there's been a shit ton of foundings. The 25th founding, like, how many foundings are you guys gonna have, man?
And then finally, the Star Phantoms are another chapter with an unknown heritage, and though official records have them as part of the
Star Phantoms is kind of a badass name, I'm not gonna lie. Star Phantoms that sounds pretty dope.
The 23rd Sentinel founding in the 38th millennium, there are also records of the Star Phantoms operating shortly after the Heresy alongside the Flesh Tearers. The Star Phantoms are a brutal chapter who focus on heavy firepower and the complete annihilation of their enemies, even if that results in friendly casualties. Their organization is Codex compliant, apart from featuring a larger number of Devastator squads per company than usual. But their tactics have seen them investigated multiple times and saw them described by Lord Solar Macarius as unsuitable for the close support of other Imperial units. Both the Star Phantoms and the Dark Angels have vehemently adamantly denied any link, though their chapter symbol is a mirror of the old 1st Legion formation of the Dreadwing, a skull set in an hourglass, and their tactics, the total annihilation of their enemies, was the goal of that formation back in the Crusade era. So, as always, the Dark Angels are a bit suspicious. 3 official successors of the Second Founding, plus 1 destroyed and covered up, and 3 more chapters with differing records, but who seem to line up, especially the 2 who could just be old Legion formations that were hived off from the whole in the wake of...
Right, yeah. Been 10,000 years and they've needed the numbers, that's why there's so many chapters. Right. I still, I feel like you could still consolidate some of these even more, right? Like, I get the idea is that they're trying to split it up so that they're trying to essentially keep the warrior lodges situations from kind of happening again and limiting their numbers to just 1,000 per, so that if any group decides to rebel, they can be, overrun fairly easily instead of having, numerous legions of hundreds of thousands of Space Marines, turn. I get that, but I don't know. It still just seems like it's just adding too much. I don't know. Again, because it's just my way of thinking how my brain works. I would think that, yeah, you could split them up into smaller groups, but then you would also want to make sure that each group has certain kinds of specializations so that they can be utilized and properly in certain, and deployed properly in certain arenas of combat so that their specialties can be used properly. You know what I mean? But then there's seemingly hundreds of different chapters and each one has their own specialization. So it's like, how do you really figure out who to deploy where when it really just kind of comes down to probably who's closest? You know what I mean? Right. I mean, yeah, and that's what it seems to be. It seems to be, yeah, with Gilliman and the line coming back, and probably other Primarchs, and with the Primaris Space Marines being created, yeah, things definitely seem to be consolidating a little bit more.
Of the reorganization. The Iron Hands were a much simpler prospect. Their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, was the first to be killed at the outset of the heresy, and the remainder of the Legion was fractured without his...
Fucking Fulgrim. Fulgrim's the one that killed him, right? Pretty sure that's how it went down.
Command.
Because Fulgrim crafted his hammer, and he crafted Fulgrim's sword, if I remember correctly.
Breaking down into hundreds of independent armies and companies and fighting a guerrilla war against the traitor forces. The Iron Hands often formed the core of the Shattered Legions, formations with mixed legion provenance who harried Horus's forces as they tried to make their way to Terra. By the end of the heresy, the remaining Iron Hands, who returned to their home world of Medusa, elected a clan council to rule it in the future, and they were initially very resistant to splitting the Legion again, until Gilliman gifted them the skull of Ferrus Manus, and then apparently they were fine with it all. The Iron Hands were only reorganized into 3 chapters. The Iron Hands themselves...
Here's your Primarch skull, shut up. Okay.
And 2 noted successors, the Brazen Claws and the Red Talons. The Brazen Claws wear a quartered scheme of blue and dark red with their symbol, confusingly, a red talon. They share many of the beliefs of their parent legion, including a complete lack of remorse and a dedication to improving their bodies through cybernetic enhancement. They were originally assigned to the world of Talos 4, but this was destroyed much later during the spread of the Great Rift, leaving them as a fleet-based chapter. The Red Talons have a much more distinctive history, as they predate the Second Founding. The Red Talons are formed from the remnants of the old Iron Hands Legion's Clan Morrigal, which was led by the Terran captain Ortek.
Clan Muggles?
Moore was an extremely volatile commander, and he and his Primarch never really got on, which led to his company operating semi-independently throughout the Crusade and becoming something of a sink for outcasts and the more unstable elements of the Legion. Moore led his company and considerable allied forces in a horrific campaign of vengeance behind traitor lines, targeting traitor allied worlds from the bridge of his flagship, the Red Talon, destroying the densely packed world of Gethsemane with dirty atomics and obliterating the traitor mining world of Saria Major with an orbital bombardment that left the air poisoned, millions choking to death in their wake. After the heresy was over, it was a relatively simple matter to allow Clan Morrigal to retain their independence as a new chapter, now renamed the Red Talons and adopting Ortec-Mor's clan sigil of a red talon on a black field as their new heraldry.
Okay.
The Space Wolves had an interesting response to the creation of the Codex Astartes. Liman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, was initially reluctant to change anything about his legion, refusing to accede to demands from his brother until, as mentioned, the situation seemed likely to deteriorate into war. At this point, he relented. First by proposing that the Space Wolves Grand Companies be given more independence, in effect operating as
what is the blank spot here?
Successors, but in truth just allowing the Space Wolves to retain a much greater size. And second, with the creation of a single true successor chapter, the Wolf Brothers. The Wolf Brothers were to be a direct copy of the Space Wolves and received half of everything they had. Their fleet, warriors, armor, and weapons were split down the middle, and they were settled on the ice world of Cariol under the command of Bear Arjak Grimason. They were originally intended to be...
Oh, what is this? This mic must have gone weird or something. They lost the 13th company? Gotcha. His like mic has gone kind of weird, like getting some kind of like weird background interference going on now.
Be the first of a line of Space Wolf successors
Malnyar,
known as the Sons of Rust that would completely encircle the Eye of Terror, but things went wrong soon after. Away from the stabilizing influence of the people of Fenris, their Canis Helix devolved, and the curse of the Wolfen, amongst other worse mutations, became extremely common.
I remember hearing about that.
Shortly after their formation, the chapter had to be disbanded by the Inquisition, though it's known that many of the cursed Wolf brothers escaped into the Eye of Terror, and some have occasionally been seen serving with Chaos warbands in the year.
Some of them are still good too. Weren't there situations where Wolven guys came and like helped the loyalist legions in certain fights? I remember some videos about that. Maybe I'm mistaken though.
Years since. No other Space Wolf successors would be attempted until the Ultima founding. The Imperial Fists were the other major opponents of the split. As mentioned, Rogaldorn was vehemently against the splitting down of the legions, and he only relented after the Ultramarines rescued his forces from the disastrous Iron Cage incident during the scouring. Seeking to avoid more internal strife, the Imperial Fist Legion was split down into a number of chapters, often based on internal divides within the 7th Legion itself.
And aren't mutants kind of being a little bit more accepted now too? In certain things like Ogren and whatnot, aren't some other mutants again just being more accepted and utilized in the Imperium now than they were before?
Yet, like the Dark Angels, they retained a backup plan in the form of the Last Wall Protocol, an agreement to reform as a legion in case of threat to terror, and the successor chapters of the Fists continue to honour the Feast of Blades, a centennial dueling competition between successors designed to ensure good relations amongst the Line of Dawn. The most famous successors of the Imperial Fists are the Black Templars, originally led by the Imperial Fists' first captain Sigismund and formed from the remains of the Templar Brethren. The Templar Brethren were an elite order of the Imperial Fists, formed of its most skilled bladesmen and officially dedicated to guarding the Temple of Oaths aboard the Imperial Fist flagship, the Phalanx. Their leader was Sigismund, one of the finest duelists in the Imperium, but through the
That's what I thought. I thought the Wolven were, I thought that some of them had turned and gone to chaos, but some of them stayed loyal, but they kind of hid away because they were being hunted down. And there was some kind of battle where some of the one of the chapters was getting wiped out or whatever, and the Wolven guys came out and fought and like turned the tide. From what I remember, I don't remember the specifics of it.
Heresy. He also became one of the few devout Space Marines, venerating the Emperor as a god, which caused considerable friction with his Primarch, who felt in some ways that he could no longer trust his most valued captain. During the siege of the palace, he was named the first Emperor's Champion, armed with the Black Sword, and conducted a campaign outside the walls to decapitate traitor forces. When the Imperial Fists were then split, Sigismund became the new master of the Black Templars, who adopted his personal heraldry of black and white as their scheme, and retained the Templar cross.
Wasn't Sigismund like considered the greatest swordsman of his time? Didn't he get killed by Abaddon in one of the Crusades? Didn't they fight one-on-one and Abaddon eventually beat him? But until then, like, Sigismund was considered like the greatest duelist that was not like a Primarch or something like that.
Cross as their symbol. The Black Templars are, however, very much not Codex compliant. A fanatical chapter of religious zealots, the Templars are fleet-based, maintain numerous independent crusades across the galaxy, and are suspected to be far, far larger than a standard Codex compliant chapter would usually be allowed to be. The Crimson Fists were then the opposite. Formed from the newest recruits to the 7th Legion, they were commanded by a captain of the 405th Company, Alexis Pollux, a rising star in the Legion and a master of void warfare. Pollux, who was known back then as the Crimson Fist, was a massive Astartes armed with a...
I wonder what void... Excuse me. I wonder what void warfare is supposed to mean. Like, does that mean, like, actually, like, in the warp? Something like that?
Signature giant power fist, and who had fought in the heresy at the Battle of Thal and commanded Imperial Fist forces on Sotha in Ultramar. The Crimson Fists have blue armor with the left gauntlet painted red.
Yeah, someone had posted, they were posting Discord about that. About them being the, on the cover of the first edition. I think it was in the memes channel. Yeah. Magnus was posting about it. Crimson Fists are also the first Space Marines being on the cover of the first edition rulebook. That's pretty dope. So yeah.
And their symbol is a red variant of the standard Imperial Fists one. They were fleet-based until the late 40th millennium, when they took custodianship of Rin's world. The Fists Exemplar were another mirror to the Templars, this time being formed from those in the Imperial Fists who most supported the introduction of the Codex Astartes. Their first chapter master, Auriax Dantalion, was a captain of the Imperial Fists who'd originally counseled Dawn to agree to the split, which Dawn then long refused. When Dawn finally gave in, he remembered Dantalion and gave him command of a new chapter named the Fists Exemplar, since its members were exemplars of the new ways of the Imperium. Their armor was originally completely unadorned grey ceramite without any chapter symbol. The Fist Exemplar were intended to be based on an orbital station, the Alcazar Astra, but as it was being towed into its new position near a warp storm called the Rubricante Flux, it was hit by an eruption of warp energy and was forced to make planetfall on Idolica, which would become their new homeworld.
Can you imagine
Idolica
trying to land that thing on a planet?
And destroyed in M32 during the War of the Beast, and the chapter disbanded by its final chapter master,
the War of the Beast. That's something I'm going to have to look into.
Maximus Thane, after his subordinate captain attempted to ally with a force of Iron Warriors to hold back the Orcs. Maximus Thane would go on to become a chapter master of the reformed Imperial Fists after the war, but the story of the Fists Exemplar ends there.
Bro, the fucking beeping going on is distracting me. Like, honestly, whatever's going on with this mic, like, I feel like someone is sitting there and like tapping, I can't think of the name of it. The old transmissions they used to do that it's not SOS, but I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head. What I'm having a brain fart, but that's what it sounds like. Sounds like someone sitting there and like tapping.
Scoriators were formed by the Imperial Fist captain.
I don't know if you guys are hearing that on the recording.
Who was instrumental in holding the walls of terror. Their heraldry is bone white, and their symbol a fist holding onto two thunderbolts, and they're based on the world of Escara in the Segmentum Obscurus. This proximity to the Eye of Terror has made them extremely practical. Rather than hold the line in the face of overwhelming odds like many other Imperial Fist successors, their priority was always to survive, to cause as much damage as possible while minimizing their own losses. However, they do embody a lesser-known belief of the Sons of Dawn, which is the obsession with pain and the endurance of pain. In the Excoriators, ritual mortification and penitence is an obsession. Their chapter practicing various rites centered around scouring and ritual endurance, and this even extends to their war gear. Damaged armor is only repaired to the point of functionality, the mark left for all to see, and tagged with the date and location of the damage. Within the chapter, marked and pitted armor is seen as a sign of veteran status. These beliefs have led to some deviation from the Codex in terms of their rank system, but the corpus captains, scourges, whips, and santiarchs of the chapter preside over a strong and unique chapter cult that reviles emperor worship and the teachers of the ecclesiarchy, and continues to venerate their Primarch Dawn through ritual pain and suffering instead. The Soul Drinkers were a second founding chapter of the Imperial Fists, their armor purple and bone, and their symbol a chalice with laurel wreaths. Fleet-based, they were originally formed from the Imperial Fists' remaining void-capable shock attack elements. They were extant until the 41st millennium, when a brutal civil war led by their chief librarian turned new chapter master turned giant half-spider thing, it's a long story, meant that the chapter were declared renegade and all but wiped out. The name and colour scheme, though, was reused.
I need to hear that again.
Turned a brutal civil war led by their chief librarian turned new chapter master turned giant half-spider thing. Their chief librarian
turned chapter master turned giant spider thing.
Turned new chapter master turned giant half-spider thing, it's a long story, meant that the chapter were declared renegade and all but wiped out. The name and colour scheme, though, was reused during the Ultima founding for a new Primaris chapter. The Iron Knights are a potential second founding chapter. It's unclear if they're second or third founding, and their homeworld is variously listed as Bracantia or Saharis. In either case, they're a relatively small chapter of specialised siege breakers, noted for their uncommonly compassionate approach to regular Imperial civilians, and the fact that their dueling champions have won the...
That's one of the things that I kind of never really got. I mean, I do kind of understand it to an extent, because, like, you know, these Astartes are genetically modified humans, and that's kind of like one of the things that could happen when you're genetically modifying them. Their, I guess, you know, egos could also be conflated with that, inflated, whatever. So, like, the idea that the Astartes are better than normal humans could be easily seen, you know. So I could see why they would feel, I don't know, like maybe contempt. I don't know if that's the right word that I'm looking for, but they would look down upon normal citizens. But at the same time, like, that's literally what the Emperor made them for, was to expand the influence of humanity to protect the average normal, you know, human citizen, so that eventually one day, you know, when we've conquered the galaxy and there are no more, or at least very minimal, threats to humanity in the Imperium, we can have a golden age where people can just live their lives in peace, and, you know, we'd have an era of scientific, you know, discovery and exploration and all that kind of shit again. Soul Drinker Chapter Master, this is even my final. Yeah, for real, dude.
Feast of Blades twice in consecutive events. The Iron Knights wear gunmetal grey power armor.
But yeah, to finish my thought, so it's like, that always kind of like made me, it always kind of seems weird that a lot of Astartes look down upon, you know, just the average citizen and guardsmen and whatnot, simply because they feel themselves to be superior, which, I mean, obviously they are in some ways, in most ways, you know, physically in particular. But it's like, your sole purpose is to do that. Your sole purpose is to, like, go out there and, you know, make safe the universe for humanity. So looking down upon humanity, I guess, I don't know, is that it's supposed to be another kind of like one of the ironies of 40K? Because there's so many, like, the 40K universe is almost kind of like one big contradiction of itself, especially the Imperium. But anyway, let's continue.
And then, like the Dark Angels, we have a few weird ones. The Silver Guard are of an unknown gene line,
Silver Guard,
that
but purple,
rumoured to be Imperial Fists in origin, and stated in some records to date from the second founding. They wear purple and silver armour, and their symbol is a skull surrounded by 3 blades. They were a major presence in the Sabbat World campaign. And finally, the Executioners were formed by the Lord Seneschal of the Imperial Fists' First Assault Corps Fafnir Ran. Ran fought through the Siege of Terror with twin axes that became his personal heraldry, and then the heraldry of this new chapter, whose armor is silver with yellow details. They're known as a brutal chapter based on the twin worlds of Stygia Aquilon and formed with the stated aim of beheading the enemies of the Imperium. The chapter is largely Codex compliant, but with more than the standard number of chaplains, who the executioners refer to as Death Speakers, and their chapter master is named
that's
the
pretty
High
dope title.
Executioner. But while all of this is a classic second founding chapter origin story, a great hero of the original Legion taking his heraldry and forming a new chapter around it in his name, they're actually from the third founding, about a century later, so Fafnir Ran must have stayed in Imperial Fists for a little bit longer. Another chapter with a close-knit band of successors was the Blood Angels, who'd also been through a lot at the end of the Heresy. Their Primarch Sanguinius was killed by Horus, and this led to an increased incidence of 2 gene seed flaws the Blood Angels suffered from and largely wanted to keep a secret. The Red Thirst, the desire to drink blood, and the Black Rage, which afflicted more and more of the Legion since the death of Sanguinius. Those suffering from the Black...
Yeah, I was listening to the first Eisenhorn book, and the way they made Space Marines be a-holes just because it's annoying. Almost logical, especially because he's the same scene. To show that the regular human... Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just, like, again, I can understand to some extent, and in some ways, you know, it is, again, understandable that you have these beings that are bred to genetically be like the greatest warriors humanity has known. And they're, in a way, kind of something I think the Emperor set up so that normal people can have something to aspire to become, you know? Well, they're kind of they're there to also kind of motivate you to like be better, you know. But again, their whole point is to protect humanity and to serve as the warriors of humanity, to make sure to safeguard the galaxy so that humanity can thrive. So like looking down on normal human citizens and not caring about them, not caring about their protection. Has always seemed strange to me, because then it's like, what are you fighting for other than just fighting to fight? And again, like, you're genetically made to do that. That is kind of like your driving force and reason to exist is to fight for the glory of the Emperor and the Imperium, and to die for the glory of the Emperor and the Imperium. But what is the Imperium if not the citizens? Like, I mean, I guess the idea is that it's the Emperor. You know, that's the idea that the Astartes and a lot of people have, is that the Emperor is actually the Imperium. But again, it's really just the people, because without the people and them being the driving force and the working force and, you know, making sure that everything's running, you don't have anything to begin with. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah, I can understand the logic, but the execution is stupidly written. Yeah, and I agree. I feel like I can understand the Night Lords. Obviously, they're basically mostly criminals, and I can understand maybe, you know, the Emperor's children because of their ideas of perfection. And things like that. So like I can understand some legions, you know, looking down more on normal human citizens, but I think for the majority, I think most of the legions, it would make sense that, you know, they would have compassion and understanding and want to protect humanity, you know, normal citizens, because what else are you fighting for? I also feel like that would be something the Emperor would program into them too. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did do that early on and it caused some other kind of conflict, so he wrote that out of him. You know, I don't know. Who knows, really? But you would think that would be something that the Emperor would want to instill in them, is to, you know, instill this sense of needing to protect humanity and its citizens. Because, yeah, again, what else are you fighting for if not?
Black Rage lost Aura and Thirst, the desire to drink blood, and the Black Rage.
Yeah, we're back. Let's start this back over here. This part with the Blood Angels, since we went on that tangent.
Band of successors was the Blood Angels, who'd also been through a lot at the end of the heresy. Their Primarch Sanguinius was killed by Horus, and this led to an increased incidence of 2
Did Sanguinius have a pet dragon? Did my man have a dragon? Like what?
Gene seed flaws the Blood Angels suffered from and largely wanted to keep a secret. The Red Thirst, the desire to drink blood,
we know
and
about
the Black Rage, which afflicted more and more of the Legion since the death of Sanguinius.
And I think isn't the Black Rage a situation where they go into like a frenzy, and if they die during that rage, they're like cursed or something like that, in death? Something along those lines. But if they are like able to overcome that, they can become saints or something like that. I don't remember. I thought I remember there being something with that. Like it's a curse, but some of them can overcome it, and then they become saints if they do. Something like that.
Those suffering from the Black Rage lost all sanity and reason and were assigned to the Death Company to seek their end in battle. And these twin curses and the formation of the Death Company was passed down to all their successor chapters. Despite these flaws and their depleted numbers at the end of the Siege of Terror, the Blood Angels were split down into a surprising number of second founding successors. The Flesh Tearers were formed by the Blood Angels' Dominion Nasir Amit, also known as the Flesh Tearer. Amit was an exceptionally brutal Blood Angels officer, one of the original Terran members of the Legion before.
I mean, when your name is the Flesh Tearer, it sounds like it's going to be brutal. It's definitely metal.
Before they were reunited with Sanguinius, and as such, he was the few Blood Angels who remained from its previous incarnation as the Revenant Legion, a legion of flesh eaters and blood drinkers. Amit's new chapter, the Flesh Tearers, took the brutal death world of Cretaceous as their home and quickly gained a reputation for shocking violence and a lack of control, barely able to control their gene flaws and frequently turning their bloodlust on allied Imperial forces. Yikes. Or losing vast numbers of warriors to suicidal rages. That
sounds like quite a flaw.
Far below strength, frequently placed under inquisitorial investigation, and it wasn't uncommon for allied Imperial forces to refuse to fight alongside them. The Flesh Tearers wear dark red armor with black pauldrons, and their symbol is a spinning saw blade with a blood drop in the center. The Angels Sanguine, whose armor is halved red and black and symbol the winged skull, that will also become a theme, were reportedly formed from those of the Legion who were the most pure and faithful to the image of their Primarch, and they've had a long and glorious history in the service of the Imperium. However, their gene seed has degraded slightly further over the years. Their aspirants, recruited from their homeworld of Ansyria, must have genetic makeup similar to the people of Baal, the homeworld of the Blood Angels, and the gene degradation has resulted in their battle brothers having unusually red skin. The Angels Sanguine are often low.
Yeah, it seems like the Blood Angels and their chapters kind of have this dual nature of, being like these divine angelic, looking people, but at the same time being extremely brutal.
To reveal their faces, going helmeted at all times when around
dual nature
forces, or hiding their features in deep hoods. The Blood Drinkers also suffer from gene seed flaws, this time a mutation of the homophagia, which results in them having an even more pronounced desire for blood than the rest of the line of Sanguinius.
Makes sense, they're called the Blood Drinkers.
The Blood Drinkers have a smaller than normal death company and relatively little incidence of the Black Rage, but this is balanced by a far greater incidence of the Red Thirst, which the chapter often gives into and has led to a series of dark blood-drinking rituals practiced by the chapter cult. The Blood Drinkers' armor is entirely red, their symbol a chalice and blood drop. The Angels en Carmine are a crusading chapter described as one of the most active in the Imperium. There's so many chapters, man, it's insane. One of the more aloof chapters to deal with.
Their armor is red. With I would almost like to see like someone like Henry Cavill or something like that. Like take a test and see if you could name all the chapters. Like literally how many you could get. Like there's so many. Like we've only gone over like a few of the legions, what they're broken down to.
Black details, and their symbol, the winged blood drop, though in deviation from the norm, their Sanguinary Guard and Death Company both go to battle in white armor. The Angels in Carmine are often under strength as a result of their constant campaigning, but their Death Company is noted to always be quite large which implies a very high rate of the Black Rage. The Angels Vermilion are then the opposite, a secretive and isolationist chapter who shun contact with other Blood Angels successors. Based on the world of Corinol, the Angels Vermilion were originally the Blood Angels Legion's 9th chapter, who captured and reconditioned a line cruiser belonging to the Night Lords and used it as their flagship during the scouring. The Angels Vermilion have a reason to be secretive, though. To keep the Red Thirst at bay, they've developed particularly gruesome rituals based around the sacrifice of loyal humans designed to get them a regular supply of fresh blood, to a degree that would see them hunted down by the rest of the Blood Angels' successors if the truth ever got out. The Angels Vermilion have another bat-winged blood drop with a centered skull as their symbol, and their armor is obviously vermilion. The Sons of Sanguinius are a lesser-known chapter created from the remains of the Blood Angels' 6th company in the aftermath of the heresy, and wear terracotta red armor with black shoulder pads. Their symbol an angel-winged chalice. Despite following the same structures as the rest of the Blood Angels' successors, they seem to have achieved a remarkable level of control over the floor, and as
apothecary
such, they have no
thing there. Like stab you and heal you with that shit. Kind of was in the Chaos Gate game.
They also consider the use of psychers to be inherently chaotic and have no librarius, and their organization is geared towards swift assault. They lack large numbers of Terminator suits or heavy weapons. And then finally, there is of course another outlier. The Charnel Guard are a fleet-based chapter that seem to possess a large amount of the original.
Man's a badass. He's not even looking. He's not even looking, and you're shooting him in the face. He's like, I don't need to see this. I don't need to see this. We're gonna pop you in the face and look ahead.
Legion's relic war gear, including Fire Raptor gunships and Fell Blade tanks. They were founded by Dominion Zephon in the aftermath of the heresy, the Bringer of Sorrow, who was a commander of the Legion's destroyer elements, and they went on to serve briefly in the Maelstrom Warders before the Badab War. However, like the Executioners, despite this being a classic second founding origin story, it seems Zephon stayed with his parent chapter a bit longer than most, as the Charnel Guard are actually from the 3rd founding. The Raven Guard were one of the legions most reduced by the Horus Heresy, numbering only a few thousand warriors at the end of the war, but their Primarch, Corax, was broadly in favour of the Reformation, and the Raven Guard were broken down into 4 known chapters: the Raven Guard themselves, the Black Guard, the Raptors, and the Revilers. The Black Guard, confusingly wearing armour of white with a black helmet and pauldrons, were formed from the remains.
They just like make their uniforms on opposite day or something?
Of the Shadow Wardens, the Legion honor guard to the Primarch. Their first chapter master, Gareth Arendi, was the commander of the Shadow Wardens, honored with his command after coming to the aid of Corax on the prison world of Karandiru. The Black Guard are known for overwhelming firepower, deploying concealed artillery and then awaiting the perfect moment to strike. Apparently overkill and half measures aren't concepts they understand. The Raptors are rumored to be the descendants of a company of Raven Guard initiates deployed in harrying operations during the scouring, and then, far from home, reorganized into their own chapter during the second founding. Like their progenitors, they're masters of ambush and infiltration, but in the Raptors, this takes the form of long-range sniper deployments, guerrilla warfare, and frequent use of camouflage, something very uncommon for Space Marines. They were originally a fleet-based chapter before being assigned to a number of homeworlds. Their current base of operations, Tarangast, is kept a secret lest they lose another one. Their armor is generally a green drab, and their symbol the Raptor's head, but they've been seen in numerous other schemes, from tundra patterns to this brilliant yellow and blue scheme that might be a misidentification by some Imperial scribe back in the 80s. And finally, the Revilers wear grey power armor, and their symbol is the lightning bolt and skull. They were initially drawn from the more veteran elements of the Old Legion, and they stick to the Raven Guard tested tactics of hit and run and ambush warfare, preferring fast assault vehicles. They initially led campaigns of conquest against traitor Space Marine forces, particularly the Alpha Legion, engaging in a shadow war across the millennia. The White Scars were, again, broadly in favour of Guilliman's reforms. The White Scars Legion had originated as a legion of independent pioneer companies, and its Khans were used to operating on their own. They were never the biggest legion, but after holding the walls during the Siege of Terror, they'd become pretty small. There are only 4 recorded successor chapters of the White Scars created during the second founding, though not a lot is actually written about any of them. The Storm Lords adhered to many many of the same combat doctrines as their parent chapter.
Stormlords is a dope
their
name.
markings are a lot more Codex compliant. For some reason, the passage of time has led to quite a...
Yeah. Pussies. They're using camouflage. God, those Space Marines are pussies. Using camouflage, dude. Jesus. What a bunch of pussy Space Marines.
rivalry between the Stormlords and their progenitors, the White Scars. The two often compete for battle honors, and to see who can outdo the other. The Stormlords wear a split red and white scheme, and their chapter symbol is a skull surrounded by 3 lightning bolts.
So far, a lot of the chapters where I see them having like a split color scheme, I don't like it at all. They don't look good. Like, that just looks dumb to me. I don't know. I guess there's so many chapters that they got to figure out some kind of color scheme to them. Like, differentiate them for tabletop use, but like, I don't know, man. It just looks kind of dumb. Whoops.
The Marauders livery is yellow with black trim and their symbol a flaming sword. They're noted as an isolationist chapter with a preference for heavy firepower and praised for their marksmanship. Little else is known. The Rampagers continue the ancient White Scars practice of ritual facial scarring, apparently to a more extreme degree than the scars themselves. Their symbol is a white hand grasping a lightning bolt. They're also one of the successors noted as having fought alongside the White Scars shortly after the Second Founding, pacifying the Yasan sector under Jagatai Khan as the wars of the scouring continued. And also involved in that campaign were the Destroyers, the final White Scars successor here, who are famed for their eagerness to close to battle and their aggressive and savage.
And it's like, why you got one knee pad green? You got the whole yellow and black thing going on, and then you're just like, man, this left knee pad right here, I'm gonna make that green. I don't know why. We're just gonna do it.
Style of warfare. Their armor is black with yellow pauldrons and helmet, and their symbol is a black skull framed by lightning bolts. Before we get into the largest of the old legions, we also need to mention the smallest. The Salamanders were one of the legions almost completely wiped out near the very start of the heresy during the drop site massacre on Istvan V, and they never recovered. By the end of the heresy, after...
I still hope if we ever actually do get a cinematic universe, if like the Henry Cavill, I've seen a lot of articles and rumors that the Henry Cavill show isn't moving forward now. Supposedly, there's nothing been officially announced one way or the other. But if things ever do like really move forward and we actually get a 40K show, I really hope we actually do see the Istvan 5 drop site massacre. Like, that would be a crazy thing to watch in a cinematic format, you know, whether it be in a movie or a TV show or whatever. Like, it would just be insane to watch. Might be a company designation or something like that. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It just looks weird, you know.
After fighting in the Shattered Legions and resurrecting their Primarch Vulcan, there were only about 700 Salamanders left, barely enough to continue as just one chapter. Those successor chapters would be created in time. The Apocrypha lists no known second founding successors of the Salamanders. And then, finally, we have the Ultramarines. The 13th Legion were always one of the biggest legions. Their massive recruitment area of Ultramar and their logistical genius had always kept them well supplied in terms of recruits, and though they suffered heavily at the start of the heresy, the Battle of Calth taking a heavy toll, they were then isolated from the majority of the war by the Ruin Storm, a massive warp storm designed to keep the largest loyalist legions trapped on the eastern fringe and unable to intervene. By the time the heresy was over, the legion were almost back to full strength, and so during the second founding, the Ultramarines were the basis for the vast majority of chapters as the old legion was broken down. Because of this, and because of the legacy of their Primarch, the Ultramarines and their successors are sometimes
Sons of Gilman, Doom Eagles, Void Tridents, Castilians of the Rift, the Doom Legion. We got a lot of Doom here. When I see this, I see Dark Souls, though. You know, when I first looked at it, I was like, Dark Souls? What? Oh, no, that's Dark Suns. Okay, yeah. Eagle Warriors, Mortificators. Do these guys just hunt down Mortarion? Like, is that their whole thing? Is the hunt down to Death Guard?
Known as the Primogenitor chapters. The Apocrypha of Scaros claims that the Ultramarines sired 23 successors, though we only have 18 here, and given their numbers, it's likely there are some more.
Yeah, Istvan 3 and 5 would be crazy to see. It would be something that would be pretty wild to see done, and done right, you know.
Unrecorded somewhere. The Aurora chapter formed from the Ultramarines' 4th chapter, already known as the Aurorans. They were a chapter focused on armoured assault, possessing 5 times as many armoured vehicles as most other chapters, and they fought on Calth during the initial attack, and alongside the Imperial Fists at Chthoniya during the scouring. As an independent chapter, they remained well known for their coordinated armoured assaults, and they maintained significant chapter forges on their homeworld of Firestorm. Their armour is green, which was the colour of the 4th chapter veterans in the Legion days, and their old honour marking of the Auroran ribbon was repurposed as their new chapter symbol. The Black Consuls were founded by Arios Kordos, an Astartes of the Ultramarines' 75th chapter, who earned the name Bane of Lorgar after leading his new chapter on a campaign against the Word Bearers in the Orb Star system.
Fucking
the Black
Lord
Consuls
Bearers,
are a
dude.
crusading chapter and close
Fucking Lorgar and Erebus. They're really the ones that started the heresy. It should be the Erebus heresy, honestly.
confidants of the Master of the Ultramarines on Macragge, though during the 40th and 41st millennium they were slowly scattered, first when their star fort was destroyed by Drakari, and then when much of their strength was annihilated by the Iron Warriors during the Siege of Goddenhive. They wear black armour and their symbol is a white eagle's head. The White Consul's colour scheme is the inverse of their progenitors, white armour with blue detail. Their symbol
apparently it's thunderstorming out, so if for whatever reason my internet or power goes out, I apologize. I will get this done as soon as possible if that happens. But yeah, I don't know if you heard that crack of thunder there through the microphone, but it is thunderstorming out now apparently.
a blue eagle.
Florida.
Head. Like the Black Consuls, they were one of the Astartes Crises chapters assigned to guard the Eye of Terror, and as a matter of course they maintained two chapter masters, one to fortify their homeworld of Sabatine, while the other was on crusade around the Eye. The White Consuls also take the teachings of Guilliman seriously in terms of governance. Their officers oversaw the administration of several nearby worlds. However, with the spread of the Great Rift, their homeworld was lost to the forces of Nurgle. And the Viridian Consuls were presumably the same as those last two, but green, though records are sparse, since after joining a penitent crusade into the Eye of Terror, they were corrupted to chaos, becoming a chaos warband.
Right, yeah. Yeah, Lorgar did try to run things, but then Horus was like, bitch, I've already been corrupted. I'm in charge, motherfucker. Sit down. I always saw Lorgar as kind of a bitch, dude. Lorgar was a pussy. He was weak.
Band known as the Broken. The Doom Eagles are a chapter that specialise in jump pack assault, their armour silver with red detailing, and their symbol a skull-headed eagle. But unlike the usual noble bearing of the Ultramarines, the chapter are quite morbid due to the influence of their founder, Tullian Aquila, a captain of the 13th Legion who lived through the wasteland of the War for Calth. To the Doom Eagles, they're already dead, and their rites and rituals focus on channeling that fatalism towards a sense of duty, their lack of inhibitions and doubts allowing them to serve the citizens of the Imperium as much as possible before their inevitable demise. The Eagle Warriors were formed from the Old Legion's 20th chapter, also known as the Eagles, who were specialists in void combat. Again, they fought in the Battle of Calth, and the Void veterans of the chapter were reconstituted into an independent chapter after the war. The Eagle Warriors remain a fleet-based chapter, patrolling the worlds of the Eastern Fringe, protecting the area occupied by old Ultramar and many of the worlds originally brought into compliance by Guilliman. They wear a halved blue and white scheme. Their symbol is a blue eagle's wing. The Genesis chapter are based on the planet of Newfound on the Eastern Fringe, close to the original domains of the Ultramarines, and apart from their armour, which is painted red with yellow detailing, they're considered to be one of the closest doctrinally to their progenitors. In fact, it's often stated that they were the first of the successor chapters to be created, wresting their homeworld from word-bearer control in their very first battle. The Genesis chapter cleave extremely close to the Codex Astartes, allowing no deviation however slight. They regularly answer the call of Macragge, and their chapter maintain a standing auxiliary force of armed chapter serfs known as the Newfound Expeditionary Auxilia, in imitation of the famed Ultramar Auxilia. The Insectors wear a scheme of green and gold, their symbol a stylized eye with the original Legion symbol.
That's some bright ass green color, man. You're not really hiding with that, are you?
people in the center,
I guess it depends on the world you're on.
Second founding are very scarce. Their actions unrecorded until millennia later when they fought in the Macarian Wars, and they were later almost wiped out by the Minotaurs chapter after they got into a protracted and extremely costly honor duel with the Doom Warriors chapter. The Iron Snakes are one of the less Codex Adherents chapters to come from the 13th Legion, formed by the
Iron Snakes. That's a badass name for a chapter.
The Ultramarines' 6th Company Captain, Saw Damocles. The Iron Snakes are based on the moon of Charybdis, around the icy ocean planet of Ithaca, and are charged with the protection of an area of space known as the Reef Stars. The chapter are highly independent, organised into a series of squads rather than companies, each squad named after a hero of the chapter, looking to its own recruitment and training, its sergeant able to commit his squad to whichever conflict arises as he sees fit. The Iron Snakes are even known to send single Astartes to deal with Xenos threats, such as the wide area they're required to cover. The Iron Snakes are veterans of years of conflict against the local Xenos like Drakari and the Orcs, and also committed significant forces to the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. Their armor is silver with white pauldrons bearing the double loop.
You know, I feel like were I to be an Astartes, that's what I would prefer to do, would be to fight alien races instead of fighting other, you know, lost human, you know, nations or whatever that they're trying to bring into the fold, or I guess fighting probably, I don't know, I guess Chaos Marines and demons would be something too, but like I would want to fight other things that aren't just humans, essentially, would be what I would want to do, because like, I don't know. Again, it comes down to like my thinking of, you know, we're supposed to be fighting for the greater good of humanity. And I understand from a perspective, they're against the Imperium. That could be seen as they're not, you know, for the greater good, but they're still people, you know. That was kind of one of the things that started bringing doubt in Horus's mind, you know, in the first book here, was him wondering if other ways of other humans were better than how the Imperium was handling things, and if there wasn't actually a better way of going about and unifying the galaxy. But anyway.
Serpent that was once the personal heraldry of Saw Damocles. The Libators are one of the more brutal of the Ultramarine successors. Clad in yellow ceramite, their chapter symbol is a chalice with an ultra glyph in the center, and this symbol and their name come from their practice of offering the blood of their enemies as a sacrifice to Guilliman and to the Emperor. The Libators consider the blood of captured enemy champions to be the most worthy source of this offering, which has led to censure from various Imperial authorities in the past. The Mortifactors are formed by an Ultramarines officer known as Sasebo Tezuka, who was drawn by the Imperial Tarot to site the chapter's new fortress monastery in orbit around the feral world of Pozol. Outwardly, the chapter is a strict adherent of the Codex Astartes, but its beliefs and ritual practices have since become heavily influenced by the tribal beliefs on the planet below. Its warriors are known to enter a meditative trance to divine where best to fight their next battle, and they're rumoured to drink the blood and eat the flesh of their enemies. They also take the skulls of their enemies as trophies, and the chapter's orbiting fortress monastery is lined with the preserved skulls of thousands of previous battle brothers, all of which.
So these are like they literally took the idea of the Predator and just made them into a Marine chapter,
which makes them distrusted allies to many of the other Ultramarine successors. Their armor is bone and black, and their symbol, appropriately, is a skull. The Nemesis chapter is another chapter formed from a pre-existing Legion culture. The 22nd chapter of the Ultramarines were of mostly Terran origin and contain many of the Legion's destroyer squads, squads armed for campaigns of Exterminatus. They'd taken the name Nemesis long before the Legion's rediscovery of Guilliman, and they were always a bit of a pariah within the Legion after that. Guilliman was never a fan of the specific tactics of destroyer units. At the end of the war, the chapter became independent. Its new chapter master, Ilion Iasus, had them renamed officially to Nemesis, and their colours changed to green, but their symbol was kept the same, a white skull. They remain specialists in Exterminatus actions. The Nova Marines are one of the most famous successors of the 13th Legion, founded by the Ultramarines captain Luke.
I feel like I've heard of them before.
Lucretius Corvo. The Nova Marines are strict adherents to the words of Guilliman and the Codex Astartes, and proponents of the monodominant philosophy, the belief in mankind's inherent superiority over all other life. Their armory is well maintained, consisting of a full company's worth of Terminator plate and significant armoured assets. Though they maintain a large and expansive fleet, they're actually based on the feral world of Honorium at the northernmost point of the Ultima Segmentum, but unlike, say, the Mortifactors, the tribal practices of their new recruits are dispensed with in training, replaced by a culture similar to the one you'd find in a city on the crag. The only practice that remains is the Nova Marines' tradition of tattooing their skin with a record of their deeds, seen as a way of armouring the soul, and their librarians are noted to adopt some non-standard practices because of this. The Nova Marines are also common contributors to the Death Watch and maintain a permanent core of returned Death Watch veterans. The Nova Marines wear the blue and bone quartered heraldry of their founder, Corvo. Their symbol is a skull in a 12-pointed star. The Obsidian Glaives were a Codex adherent chapter based on the world of Obstria. Notably, their chapter teachings considered the duty of service as a Space Marine to be a form of penance, a punishment inflicted on the criminals they took as aspirants from nearby worlds. Obstria itself was uninhabitable, radioactive to the point where it could damage Astartes war gear if not maintained properly, and its surface was often used as training for aspirants to the chapter. The chapter wore black and bone armour, but few records remain since they were destroyed by the Red War in the late 41st millennium. The Patriarchs of Elixis are another Codex-compliant chapter who put a strong emphasis on skilled and tactical defense of Imperial worlds.
Fucking Patriarchs,
for their skilled blade work, but that's about all we have. The armour is red and bone, and their symbol is a skull crowned with the original Legion symbol. And the Silver Eagles are another chapter with very little written record, armoured in silver power armour with blue pauldrons and an Imperial Aquila as their symbol. And finally, we have the Silver Skulls. The Silver Skulls are a relatively Codex-compliant chapter, originally assigned to the planet of Lyria, but after the world was infected by the forces of Nurgle in M33, they were reassigned to the feral world of Varsavia. The Silver Skulls retain all Astartes specialities, but have a considerable focus in siege warfare. Their 9th company designated a full siege company. They're known as being relentless, efficient, and extremely pragmatic and brutal in close assault. Like many other chapters, their homeworld has slowly influenced their beliefs. Their librarians are known as prognosticars, who study the warp to divine where best the chapter should fight, and like the Mortifactors, the Silver Skulls are headhunters. After the battle, the skulls of particularly notable enemies are flensed and coated in silver as trophies of battle. The Silver Skulls are subject to an unusual amount of scrutiny over their origin. Their gene seed records classified by the Inquisition for many years, until with the return of the Primarch.
I mean, who doesn't like jump packs, man? You know what I'm saying?
Guilliman confirmed that they were definitely 100% Ultramarines and definitely not anything else. Those are all the second founding successors with recorded progenitors, but there are other chapters that can chart their claim back to the second founding, though their gene seed origin has long been lost.
There's still so many chapters, like look at all that, man. That's like insane.
Yellow Jackets, Scar Lords, or Purple Stars, but some other specialist chapters are regularly grouped in with the second founding. The Red Hunters are a chapter of unknown origin who were founded originally to hunt down stragglers from the traitor legions and who are known to regularly put themselves under the command of the Inquisition. Red Hunters detachments frequently fight in inquisitorial task forces and provide honor guards for Inquisitor lords, which has led to the Astartes that make up the chapter undergoing regular mind wipes to keep them free of the taint from the enemies they have to witness. They're armoured in red ceramite bedecked with inquisitorial seals and markings. And of course, the Grey Knights are the other inquisitorially minded chapter that are often grouped in as part of the second founding, since that's a useful cover story, but they were actually founded by a separate process just around the same time. The Grey Knights were founded by Malcador the Sigillite at the end of the Heresy, created from representatives of various legions as a specialist force of psychic space marines geared around combating the newly emergent threats of demons and the warp. They weren't part of Guilliman's second founding planning, and in fact would have been hidden from view during the time. And since they needed to be explained away somehow, they're often lumped in here too. And while those are the second founding chapters we know of, from a mix of the apocryphas, the tables of successors printed in various codexes, and the records written of the chapters themselves, there are of course plenty more. There have been 26 more foundings to date, occasions where a number of Space Marine chapters have been created at once. The gene seed for these new foundings is cultivated from the batches sent back by each chapter for purity testing, both from the original Progenitor chapter and from the gene seed sent by successors. So chapters in the 41st millennium could be the successors of other successors. For example, the Marines Errant are a 23rd founding successor chapter of the Eagle Warriors. In some cases, the parent chapter might be petitioned to send veterans to form a new officer corps, but in others, the original officers come from elsewhere, or the chapter might be left without a full knowledge of where their gene seed originally came from. The formation of one of these new foundings is a grave and costly endeavour, but it's happened pretty regularly over the years. The third founding, as mentioned, happened barely a century after this one, and others have been ordered by the High Lords as a response to various threats. The fourth founding was ordered in the aftermath of the War of the Beast. The 23rd Sentinel founding was intended to shore up Imperial defences, but none of those was as big as with the Ultima founding. That was the most recent. It introduced the Primaris Marines to the armies of the Imperium, founding many new Primaris-only chapters and reinforcing a lot of the current ones with new Marines taken from the same gene lines. Some chapters, like the aforementioned Soul Drinkers, have even been completely reformed as a brand new Primaris chapter, carrying the colours and the symbols of the original one. The Space Marines of the second founding were very much a new template for the Imperium, and one that's been carried on into the 42nd, we think, millennium. And while nowadays it seems to be quite common that the chapters will operate a bit like the legions of old, combining their forces while prosecuting Guilliman's Indomitus crusade, we should remember that they've always been a bit like that. The Dark Angels, Blood Angels and Imperial Fists all kept up practices that allowed them to unofficially reunite any time there was a big threat, from the War of the Beast to the Tyrannid invasion of Baal. And of course, in modelling terms, all that exists so that people can create their own chapters. The second founding was a defining point in the lore of 40.
Alright, we're getting lightning strikes pretty close here, so I gotta shut down. I don't want, my house to get struck, my computer to get blown up. So I apologize, there's less than a minute left in this video. But thank you guys for watching, I appreciate you. And yeah. Alright guys, we're back. Sorry about that. The unfortunate side effect of living in Florida at times, we get thunderstorms quite often down here, and we were getting some lightning strikes close to the house. So I had to shut it down. Obviously, if my computer gets fried, I can't make content. So anyway, that was a video here by Arbiter Ian. Great video as always, going over the second founding chapters that had been created. And their origins, where they came from, etc. Links will be down below in the description, as always, to Arbiter Ian's channel and to the original video without my commentary and reaction, etc., etc. So again, that was the second founding and every Space Marine chapter it created, Warhammer 40K lore by Arbiter Ian. Do me a favor, click those links, check out his channel. If you like his content, give the man a sub. He definitely deserves the love and support. Makes a lot of great content. And yeah, if you like this video of his, give the video a like. But yeah, lots of chapters even still that are left, and I can only imagine how many in total there actually are. And again, I don't know how anyone could really just keep track of all of them. There's so many. But yeah, I would still like to hear some more. There's obviously numerous different foundings, and different chapters have been created throughout those various foundings. Some even seemingly have chapter masters coming into positions of power in those chapters after they have been formed in previous foundings. I don't know, it all gets kind of confusing, but very interesting video nonetheless. But yeah, thanks you guys for watching, appreciate you, hope you're having a wonderful day. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a sub. That helps me and helps the channel grow. If you would like to come join the discussions that we have before, during, and after these videos, these live reactions, we'd love to have you guys come in here. and join in the discussions, hear your opinions, etc. There's a join button down below and a link in the description. You can check out the YouTube membership benefits and the various tiers that I offer and see if any of them have any interest if you decide you want to take your support to the next level. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We'll see you guys on the next one.